The shuttle hit the docking clamp hard enough to crack the rear viewport, and Dara Cole did not flinch. She was already unconscious before the metal finished groaning, her head resting against the side panel like she had simply decided to take a nap and picked a bad moment for it. The crew of Medical Station Orem 9 pulled her out with practiced hands. They had seen crash survivors before. Humans were still new to the Galactic Collective, barely 40 years into membership, and they came through the station more often than anyone expected. Mostly because, as the station director had once noted in a tired report, humans appeared to have a gift for surviving things that should have killed them. Dara fit that description well. Her vitals were strange but steady. No broken bones. Minor burns on her left arm. A shallow cut across her palm that had already stopped bleeding. For someone who had apparently lost control of her shuttle at high speed and spun through a debris field, she looked almost fine. They moved her to the diagnostic ward. Dr. Sovol was the one who ran the first scan. He was Orathi, six-limbed and precise, with compound eyes that could track 12 data streams at once. He had practiced medicine for 61 years. He had scanned thousands of bodies across dozens of species. He had never, in all of that time, seen a scanner simply stop working. The first machine locked up during the chest pass. He assumed a calibration error and moved to the second unit. The second unit completed the skull and neck before it threw an unknown fault code and shut itself down. He stood very still for a moment. Then he brought over the third scanner, the old one, the one they kept for emergencies and backup purposes, the one that had never failed. It completed the legs and torso. It moved up toward the left shoulder. It produced a long, clean tone and went dark. Sovol looked at the blank screen. He looked at the human lying on the table. He looked at Nurse Erin, who had gone very quiet in the corner. "Run a manual diagnostic on all 3 units," he said. Erin was Peluvian, soft-voiced, with pale skin that shifted color faintly depending on her mood. She had gone a light yellow, which meant nervous. She nodded and got to work. The human woke up while Erin was still running the checks. She did not wake up confused the way most crash survivors did. She did not grab for anything or cry out. She opened her eyes, looked at the ceiling and said, "Is my shuttle okay?" Sovol moved to her side. "Your shuttle sustained significant damage. You were unconscious for 2 hours. You are aboard Medical Station Orem 9. Can you tell me your name?" "Dara Cole," she said. "Human, cargo hauler, independent, licensed." She sat up slowly and looked around the room with calm brown eyes. "What happened to your scanners?" "I was hoping you could help me understand that," Sovol said. She looked at the 3 dark machines along the wall and said nothing. Sovol proceeded with a manual physical check. Everything appeared normal until he reached the left shoulder blade. He felt it with his secondary hands before he saw it on the thermal reader, which was the only instrument still working. A small mass, warm, about the size of a large grape, sitting beneath the skin between her shoulder blade and her spine. It moved, slowly, rhythmically, like something breathing. Sovol stepped back. He looked at the thermal image for a long moment, and then looked at Dara. "Ms. Cole," he said carefully, "there is something beneath the skin of your upper back, near the left shoulder, a small mass. It appears to be moving." Dara rolled her shoulder once, the way someone does when they already know what you are about to say. "Yeah," she said. Sovol waited. She looked at him with an expression that was not quite embarrassed and not quite apologetic. Somewhere between the two, leaning toward patient. "That's just Dot," she said. The room was very quiet after that. Erin had stopped moving entirely. The thermal reader made a small, soft beep. Outside, the station hummed along the way stations do, vast and indifferent to the fact that inside one small room, the finest diagnostician in 3-star systems was standing with all 6 of his hands completely still, looking at a human who had just given a name to the thing living inside her body. Sovol exhaled through his secondary breathing slits. He picked up his notes. He set them down again. "Tell me," he said slowly, "about Dot." Dara was given a chair, a cup of something warm that was not quite tea, and a look from Dr. Soville that she could only describe as controlled panic wearing a professional face. Two more doctors came in while she talked. One was Dr. Heaven, a chorus mind, which meant it was technically 17 small creatures living in a shared body, and it thought collectively and spoke in a voice that sounded like several people agreeing with each other very fast. The other was Dr. Root, who was large and slow and made of something close to dark stone, and who did not speak at first at all. He simply stood in the corner and listened with the patience of a mountain. Dara told them what she knew, which was not much. She was 19 when it happened. She had been working a maintenance job on a flooded lower level of a residential tower in a coastal city on Earth. The water was knee-deep. The lights were bad. She had cut her palm on a broken pipe fitting, not deep, just enough to bleed. She had not thought much of it. Something touched the cut. She felt it. Small, cool, gentle, like a fingertip that was not a finger. She had looked down, but the water was dark and she could not see anything. Then she felt it move under the skin of her palm, slow and careful, like it was looking for a good place to rest. She had gone straight to a clinic. The doctor there said her palm looked fine. No sign of entry, no infection. She had convinced herself she imagined it. Except sometimes she could feel it move, and she healed fast after that, faster than she used to. A bad burn on her forearm from a fuel line that should have scarred, healed in 4 days without a mark. A broken finger, set and good in a week and a half. She had assumed she was just lucky, or healthy. She had never gone back to a doctor to ask about it. "You have carried this organism for 10 years, Dr. Soville said, and you never sought a medical opinion." "I sought one at the start," Dara said. "They told me nothing was there." "You felt it move, and you simply continued living your life." "Yes." He even made a noise that was 17 small creatures all sighing at slightly different times. "What do you call it?" it asked. "Dot. Why Dot?" Dara thought about it. "Because the first time I saw it properly, it was the size of a dot. Just a little shape under the skin of my wrist, moving slow. It looked like a punctuation mark, so I called it Dot." Root spoke for the first time. His voice came out like gravel shifting. "You have seen its surface." "Twice," she said. "Both times when I was hurt. Once when I broke that finger, it moved around the break for a few hours. Once when I had a fever, it spread out flat under the skin of my back and I stopped having the fever by the next morning." She paused. "I know how that sounds." "It sounds extraordinary," Heaven said. "It sounds like a 10-year medical situation that was never reported," Soville said. "She did not know what she had," Root said, and his voice carried no judgment in it, only fact. They scanned her again with 4 more instruments, each more advanced than the last. The pattern held. Everything worked fine until the scan reached the upper left back, and then each machine either froze, returned blank data, or simply turned off. One of them threw an error code that Heaven said it had never seen before, and Heaven had been practicing medicine for 40 years. Whatever Dot was doing to the scanners was not accidental. The way it happened was too consistent. Same point, same response every time. "It is absorbing the scan frequencies," Root said after the 4th attempt. "Or redirecting them. The machines are not breaking. They are receiving something they cannot process." "Something is feeding back through the scan," Heaven agreed with itself in its layered way. "Whatever this organism is, it interacts with directed energy. It is not passive." Dara ate a small nutrition bar she had found in her jacket pocket. She had not eaten since before the crash, and she was hungry. The 3 alien doctors watched her chew with expressions that, across their very different faces, all shared the same quality. The look of beings who were used to having answers and were now very far from any. Root was quiet for a long time after the last scan attempt. He stood in his corner and stared at nothing with his flat, dark eyes, and the others waited because That was what you did when Root was thinking. Finally he spoke. I have cross-referenced every database available to this station, he said. Collective records, pre-collective archives, fringe species catalogs, independent biological surveys going back 900,000 years. He paused. This organism is not in any of them. The room stayed quiet. Nothing, he said again, as if he needed to say it twice to believe it himself. Not a match, not a near match, not a mythological reference. Nothing. Dara finished her nutrition bar and folded the wrapper neatly and put it in her pocket. Huh, she said. The quarantine notice came through on a Tuesday, which meant nothing in space, but felt like exactly the kind of day a quarantine notice would arrive. It was automatic. The station's biological monitoring system had flagged Dara's case after the third failed scan, logged it as an unknown biological contaminant, and sent the alert to the Galactic Collective Health Authority without asking anyone's opinion. By the time Dr. Sovol noticed the outgoing transmission, the response was already incoming. A GCHA containment team, 4 days out, and instructions to isolate the subject immediately. Dara took the news without much reaction. She asked if the isolation room had a window. It did. She asked if someone could bring her something to read. Erin brought a translation tablet loaded with human fiction that the station kept on file for human patients. Dara thanked her and went into the isolation ward and sat down on the bunk and started reading. Sovol stood outside the glass and watched her for a moment. She is not frightened, Erin said quietly beside him. No, he agreed. Is that a human thing? He thought about it. I am not sure if it is a human thing or a Dara Cole thing. The GCHA inspector who arrived ahead of the containment team was named Talvek. He was amphary, built lean and low to the ground, with wide flat eyes that blinked sideways and a manner that suggested he had spent his entire career filing paperwork about things other people found alarming and had long ago stopped finding anything alarming himself. He reviewed the case files. He reviewed the scan failures. He reviewed Root's database search results. Then he went to the isolation room and sat across from Dara with a recording device between them and began asking questions in the calm, unhurried way of someone who had asked the same questions to 100 different people. He asked how long. She said 10 years. He asked if there had been any behavioral changes. She said she healed faster and was maybe slightly better at knowing when weather was about to change, but she had no proof of that second one. He asked if she had ever attempted to communicate with the organism. She looked at him for a moment and said, I talk to it sometimes. I don't know if it listens. Talvik wrote something down. In the hallway outside, a junior technician named Oren was cleaning the service corridor with an automated chemical system, which was a routine job that he had done 30 or 40 times before without incident. What he had not done 30 or 40 times before was accidentally cue the wrong solution, which he did now, and the tank released a corrosive cleaning agent that was designed for hull plates and was very much not designed for the composite corridor walls of an interior medical wing. It started eating through the seal on Dara's isolation room door within about 90 seconds, slowly at first, then faster. Oren noticed and hit the emergency stop. The agent stopped spreading on the floor, but what was already on the door seal kept working. Alarms began a slow sequence of preparing to sound, the kind that takes 4 or 5 seconds to actually start. Inside the room, Dara stopped reading. She did not look at the door. She looked at her left forearm. Talvek, watching her face, saw her go very still in the way that was not fear. It was recognition. Her skin temperature spiked. Sovol saw it on the monitor outside, a sudden jump of nearly 2 degrees across her entire body in under 3 seconds. The lights in the isolation room flickered once. Then, through the skin of her left forearm, something moved to the surface. It pressed outward from beneath the skin without breaking it, the way a hand presses against fabric. It held that shape for a breath. Then it flattened and moved fast under the skin, up her arm, across her shoulder, along the back of her neck, and then it was gone into her back. The corroding door seal stopped dissolving. Not slowly, not gradually. It stopped, and then the damaged material began very slowly to close, like something was filling in the gaps from the other side. The composite reformed around the breach, imperfect but sealed, and the smell of the corrosive agent faded. The alarm started sounding, 4 seconds too late. Talvik had not moved. He was still sitting across from Dara with his recording device in front of him, and his sideways blinking eyes fixed on her arm. Outside, Erin was pressed against the observation glass. Her bioluminescent skin had gone completely white, which was not a color she produced often. It meant something between wonder and fear, and she was not sure which one was winning. Dara looked at her forearm. The skin was smooth, nothing visible. She pressed 2 fingers gently against the place where it had surfaced, the way you press a bruise to check if it still hurts. Her face was quiet and private. "Thanks, Dot," she said softly. Talvik slowly reached over and turned off the recording device. Then he turned it back on. He was not sure which was the correct procedure, and for the first time in a long career that did not surprise him, he was unsure of what to write. Erin's voice came through the glass intercom, barely above a whisper. It protected her. Soval stood beside her and said nothing. He was watching Dara, who had picked her book back up, though she was not reading it. She was just holding it and looking at the wall with an expression he could not name, not relieved, not shaken. Just present, like someone sitting quietly with a friend after something hard had passed. Dr. Root called in a favor that he had been holding for 11 years. He did not call in favors easily. He was not the kind of doctor who accumulated them carelessly, and he was not the kind to spend them on anything less than necessary. But he spent this one now, because the door seal incident had moved the situation past the point where any of them could pretend it was a biology problem with a biology solution. The favor was access to Cyril. Cyril was not a doctor or a researcher or anything that held a title in the usual sense. It was an archive intelligence, one of only 4 still running in the known galaxy, which meant it was a consciousness that had been built to remember everything and had been doing so for a very long time. Cyril's own records suggested it had been active for somewhere between 1.8 and 2.1 million years, the uncertainty being because its earliest memory logs had degraded at the edges, the way very old things do. It communicated through a text interface, because its voice processing had not been updated in several 100,000 years, and the sound it produced was difficult for biological ears. Root compiled everything: the scan failures, the thermal readings, the moment in the isolation room where Dot had surfaced and sealed the door, the brief visual from Erin's recording, 3 seconds long, slightly blurred, showing the shape pressing outward through Dara's skin. He attached all of it and sent it through the secure archive channel with a single question: "Do you know what this is?" They waited. Cyril typically responded within 4 seconds. It had never, to Root's knowledge, taken longer than that for any query. At 11 minutes, Soval stood up from his chair and walked to the window and looked at the star field outside because he needed something to look at. At 13 minutes, Heaven's 17 components began murmuring to each other very quietly. At 14 minutes and roughly 40 seconds, Cyril responded. The message was long by Cyril's standards. Most of its answers were a few lines. This one ran to several paragraphs, and the first line read, "I did not expect to find this again." Root read it aloud for the others. Cyril had no species match, no genetic catalog entry, no collective biology record of any kind, but it had found something in the oldest section of its archive, the part where the records came from civilizations that no longer existed and could not be contacted for clarification. A pre-collective species called the Vane had described creatures they named skin keepers in texts that were part religious, part biological, part something that did not translate well into any modern framework. The Vane were gone. Their home system was gone. They had been a space-faring species of moderate technology and deep philosophical tradition. And they had disappeared approximately 1.4 million years ago. No one knew why. Root had heard of them in the way you heard of many ancient civilizations, as a name in a list, a line in an archive, a footnote. The skin keepers, according to the Vane texts, were organisms that lived symbiotically with a host. They accelerated healing. They responded to physical threats. They appeared to be sensitive to the host's emotional state in ways that the Vane described with words that did not have clean scientific equivalents. Words that meant something between aware and present and caring. No physical specimen had ever been recovered. No skin keeper had ever been documented by any civilization after the Vane. Until now. Cyril added one more piece of information at the end of its message, and Root paused before reading it. The Vane records state clearly, he said, that the skin keepers were not discovered by the Vane. They did not find them in a laboratory or a wilderness. The skin keepers found the Vane. They chose their hosts. The Vane believed this was deliberate. They believed the skin keepers sought out something specific in a host, and when they found it, they stayed. The room was quiet. Heaven spoke first. They sought something specific, in the Vane, and now in a human. In this human, Soval said. No one said anything else for a while. In the isolation ward, Dara did not know any of this yet. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the bunk, which she found more comfortable than the bed itself, and she was talking to Dot the way she sometimes did when she was alone and the quiet got heavy. She was telling it about her mother, how her mother had a habit of humming while she cooked, never quite the same song twice. How the apartment they grew up in smelled like iron and cooking oil and the particular kind of damp that came from old buildings near the sea. She told it about the maintenance job, the flooded tunnel, the day they met. I was 19 and I had 20 credits in my account and a cut on my hand, she said to the air in front of her. Not exactly my best day, but I think about it a lot. She was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you picked that day, she said. Outside the observation glass, Erin was watching. She had not meant to stay so long. She had come to check vitals and had stood at the glass for nearly 20 minutes. Her skin was cycling through soft colors, slow and involuntary, the way Peluvians did when something moved them too much to hold still. She was crying light, and the hallway around her was dim and warm with it. The hearing room was on the administrative level, which smelled of filtered air and old decisions. Inspector Talvik sat at the center of a curved table with two GCHA panel members who had arrived with the containment team. Dr. Soval was present as the attending physician. Dr. Root was there as the consulting specialist. He even attended through a speaker system, because only 12 of its 17 components had been cleared for the administrative level, and it had decided that was not enough. Dara was not in the room. She was still in isolation. She had been told that a hearing was happening and that it concerned her and Dot, and that the outcome would decide what came next. She had said, "All right," and asked if someone could bring her a real meal because the nutrition packs were getting old. The panel had 3 options on the table. The first was surgical removal of the organism. The second was permanent quarantine of Dara within a collective medical facility. The third was release with monitoring, which meant a tracking implant, regular check-ins, and a file that would follow her for the rest of her life. Talvik presented each option without visible preference. The 2 panel members asked questions. Soval answered them where he could. When the subject of surgical removal came up, Root spoke at length for the first time since entering the room. He explained, slowly and with precision, that Dot's integration with Dara's biology was not superficial. In 10 years, Whatever Dot was had woven itself into her body at a level that no current scan could fully map. Attempting to remove it without knowing what it connected to was not a medical procedure. It was a guess with a scalpel. The probability of fatal outcome was not something he could calculate because he did not have enough information, and that itself was the answer. The panel considered this. One of the panel members said that an unknown organism moving freely through collective space inside a human body was an unacceptable risk regardless of the surgical concerns. The other panel member said that the organism had demonstrated active behavior, that it had repaired a structural breach in a sealed room, and that they did not yet understand the upper limit of what it could do, which was also an unacceptable risk. Talvik said that Dara Cole had carried this organism for 10 years without incident, and that there was no recorded case of harm to any party, which did not resolve the risk question, but was a data point worth noting. They went in circles for a while, the way committees do when no option is clean. Then Soval said that Dara had sent a message. He read it. She had written it on the translation tablet and asked Iran to pass it along. It said, "Ask them what happens to Dot if they remove it." The room went quiet. No one had an answer. Dot was not a tumor. It was not a parasite in any sense they understood. It was an organism that had survived in a hostile environment for potentially millions of years, that had chosen a host and maintained that choice across a decade, that had acted to protect that host when threatened. What happened to something like that when you cut it out and put it in a containment jar? They did not know. Cyril did not know. The Vane records did not say. The hearing ended without a decision. The case was escalated to the Collective High Council, which meant it would sit in a procedural queue for years, possibly decades. In practical terms, Dara was free to go, pending a monitoring agreement. She signed it the same afternoon. She did not read it carefully, which made Talvik uncomfortable, and when he said she should read it carefully, she said she trusted that it said what he said it said. He did not know what to do with that. That night, alone in the isolation room for what she did not yet know was the last time, Dara sat on the floor again. She told Dot what had happened. She explained the hearing and the options, and the fact that people she did not know had spent several hours deciding her future. She said she did not have much power over any of it. She said she was sorry if any of this had been frightening, though she added that she had no idea if Dot could be frightened and she was probably projecting. She said, "If they had decided the other way, I would have fought them as hard as I knew how. I want you to know that." She held out her hand, open palm up, an old habit by now. Dot surfaced. Not just a shape through the skin. It moved slowly, like a tide, from her back across her shoulder and down her arm, and she could feel it the whole way, warm and deliberate. It came to her open palm and rested there, pressed gently outward, visible through the skin as a soft, faintly glowing shape, multi-limbed and still and more beautiful than she could explain to anyone who had not seen it. It rested there for a long moment. Then it pressed something into her palm, not hard, like a seal pressed into warm wax, a pattern small and intricate, glowing faintly, gone in under 2 minutes. Iran caught it on recording from the observation glass. Root saw the image the next morning. He sent it to Cyril without a word of explanation. Cyril responded in 0.3 seconds. The translation was 4 words, "I chose well." Root sat with that for a long time. Then he sent it to Soval. Then he went to the window of his office and looked out at the stars and did something he had not done in many years. He did not know what to call it. Something between gratitude and grief, and the specific feeling of understanding something too large to hold. 7 days after she arrived unconscious through the docking clamp, Dara Cole walked back to her shuttle under her own power with a small bag over one shoulder and a monitoring bracelet on her right wrist that she had already decided she would decorate with something when she found the right material. Her shuttle had been patched by the station's maintenance crew, not well, but enough to fly. The rear viewport was sealed with temporary composite that would hold for 2 or 3 months if she did not push the ship too hard. She had been given a repair bill that she had folded and put in her jacket pocket without looking at the number. Dr. Sovol walked her to the docking bay. He had not slept well in 7 days, and it showed in the slight drop of his secondary limbs and the way he moved a little slower than usual. He was a precise person, and imprecision in himself bothered him, but he had not been able to correct it. He walked beside her in silence for most of the way. Then, when they reached the bay door, he stopped. "I have been practicing medicine for 61 years, he said. Dara waited. "In 61 years I have not encountered something I could not name," he said. "Something I could not place in a category and understand and explain to a patient with confidence. This is the first time." He paused. "I am still deciding whether that is a problem." Dara looked at him for a moment. Her expression was not unkind. "Maybe the point was never to categorize it," she said. "Maybe some things just want to be trusted." Sovol looked at her for a long moment. He had 6 eyes, compound and ancient and very good at reading data. He was not sure they were good at reading this. "Safe travels, Ms. Cole," he said. "You too, Doc," she said. She went through the bay door and did not look back, which was not unkindness either. It was just how she moved through things. The shuttle interior smelled of old fuel and the particular staleness of a ship that had been sealed for a week. She opened the vents and let the station air cycle through while she ran her pre-flight checks. Everything came back green except the viewport seal sensor, which read amber, which she already knew about and had noted in her log. She set the amber aside. She filed her departure with the station. The approval came back in 2 minutes. She eased the shuttle off the clamp and out through the bay, and the station fell behind her, large and lit and full of people who had spent a week being confused by her, and she felt no particular way about leaving it. The stars ahead were the same stars they always were. That was one of the things she liked about them. She thought about the Vane as she set her course. A species 1.5 million years gone. They had been chosen too. They had carried something precious inside them and had known it, had named it, had written about it in texts that survived them by longer than she could properly imagine. She wondered if they had known how lucky they were in the ordinary moments. Not the moments of crisis, when Dot repaired a door or fought off a fever. The quiet moments. The moments of just existing together. She thought she probably hoped they had. She thought she should try to do the same. The course locked in. The engine note settled to a low, steady hum that she had always found comforting, something about the frequency of it, the way it moved through the floor and up through the seat and into the bones. She had logged 10 years in this ship, and she knew all of its sounds the way you know a person's breathing. Dot moved, slow and easy, shifting from her back toward her shoulder, the way it did sometimes when she was calm, not surfacing, not responding to anything urgent, just moving in that particular way that she had learned over 10 years meant something she could not name exactly but felt like settling, like a cat finding a better position on a warm surface. She put her left hand flat on the console beside the controls, palm up, open. It was an old habit now. She had started doing it without thinking somewhere around year 3, just leaving her hand open in case. She did not know if Dot understood the gesture as a gesture. She did not know how much Dot understood of anything she did, but she kept doing it anyway. Dot did not surface, but she felt it shift closer toward her palm, warm through the skin, and the warmth stayed there. She smiled, a small one, private, not for anyone. She flew. Behind her, Aurum 9 shrank to a bright point and then to nothing. The stars did not change. The engine hummed. Somewhere in the GCHA system, her file sat in a queue that would not be reviewed for 20 years. Somewhere in Cyril's archive, 4 words glowed in a record that had waited 1 million years to be confirmed. Ahead of her was a route, a delivery, a next port, a next job, a next ordinary day. She took it.